You know how we usually read a book? It seems like a silly question, but think about it for a second. We start at the top of page one, we scan left to right, we get to the bottom, turn the page, and we expect the story to move forward in a straight line. Start, middle, end.
Very linear. Yeah, that's exactly how the Western mind works. I mean, that's how we think, how we write logic. It's even how we tell time.
Right. But today we are looking at a source that suggests there's a completely different way to write, and actually a different way to read. A way that isn't linear at all, but more circular, symmetrical.
Kind of like a mirror image. Or, a palindrome, but for actual ideas instead of just letters.
Exactly. So today we're doing a deep dive into an analysis by the scholar John W. Welch. And he argues that the Book of Mormon, which is a volume published in upstate New York in 1830, contains this incredibly complex ancient literary fingerprint called chiasmus.
And for anyone listening who's currently staring at their speakers thinking, what in the world is a chiasmus? Don't worry, it sounds like a medical condition. Or maybe like a muscle you might pull at the gym or something.
Yeah, I definitely need to stretch my chiasmus.
Right. But it is actually one of the most fascinating detective stories in literary history.
It really is. Because if Welch's analysis holds up, this isn't just about pretty writing or, ancient poetry. It's about a timeline that just doesn't add up. It's about a farm boy allegedly dictating a literary structure that the academic world wouldn't even fully understand or appreciate for another 20 years after the book was printed.
And it's the kind of thing where once you see the pattern, you honestly can't unsee it. It completely changes the texture of the pages you're reading.
So let's unlock the code here. What exactly is chiasmus in plain English?
Okay, let's strip away all the academic jargon. The term itself comes from the Greek letter chi, which, well, it looks exactly like our letter X. So just visualize an X in your mind.
Okay, I've got an X.
The structure is basically a form of inverted parallelism. In plain English, you make a point, let's just call it point A. Then you make a second point, which is B. But instead of moving on to C, you reverse the order. You go back to B. And then you end on A.
So the pattern is just A, B, B, A.
Precisely. Welch uses this classic example from the Bible in his source, Proverbs 15, verse 1. He goes, a soft answer turneth away wrath. That's the first half. So A is the soft answer, and B is the wrath.
Okay.
Then the second half is, but grievous words stir up anger.
Oh, I see it. Grievous words mirrors the soft answer. And anger mirrors wrath. It literally crosses over itself.
Right. It's a crossover. That's where you get that X shape. Or if you want a more modern, simple English example that Welch points out, he who fails to prepare, prepares to fail.
Fails, prepare, fail. Yeah, it's catchy. It really sticks in your head.
And that's the key right there. In English, we mostly use this for slogans or witty quotes or, campaign speeches, like JFK's famous line, ask what your country can do for you.
Ask what you can do for your country. Exactly. Punchy. It sounds final and authoritative. But here is where this deep dive gets really interesting. Welch argues that in the Book of Mormon, we aren't just seeing these cute little one-liners. We are seeing massive, complex architectural structures that span entire chapters. And that scale is a distinctly Hebrew characteristic.
Before we get into the heavy lifting of the text itself, because I definitely want to see if this actually holds up, let's talk about the locked room mystery aspect of this whole thing.
Yeah.
Because the timeline Welch presents is probably his biggest piece of evidence.
Right. This is what we might call the impossibility argument.
So Joseph Smith publishes the Book of Mormon in 1830, and we know his background. He had very limited formal education, and he was living in rural upstate New York.
Correct. He's not exactly, hanging out in the theological salons of Europe or browsing ancient university libraries in Scotland.
Right. So at that time, in 1830, what did the Western world actually know about this chiasmus stuff? Very, very little. And this is the absolute crux of Welch's research. For centuries, chiasmus was basically dormant in the Western intellectual mind. I mean, scholars knew it existed in Greek and Latin, but it was really just seen as a rhetorical flourish, just a decoration, kind of like adding a rhyme to a poem.
So nobody was analyzing the Bible and saying, hey, look at this. This entire chapter is a mirror image.
Not really. There were some very quiet murmurings in the early 1800s by theologians like Robert Louth or John Jebb, but their work was highly obscure. The real breakthrough, the moment the Western academic world really discovered biblical chiasmus as a major structural tool, that didn't happen until a scholar named John Forbes published his definitive work.
And what's the date on that publication?
It was called The Symmetrical Structures of Scripture, and it was published in Scotland in 1854.
1854. So that is 24 years after the Book of Mormon was printed.
And a full 10 years after Joseph Smith was already dead.
So, if I'm playing the skeptic here, and I do want to be fair to all angles, is it possible Smith just had a rhythmic way of talking? Like, maybe he just liked repeating himself in reverse. I mean, we all have verbal tics.
That's always the very first question people ask. Is this just accidental? And if we were only finding those simple A, B, B, A phrases like prepare to fail, you could actually make a really strong case for coincidence. People do speak in loops naturally.
But Welch argues it's the sheer complexity that kills the coincidence theory.
Exactly. We aren't talking about a simple four-step pattern here. We are talking about structures that go A, B, C, D, E, F, all the way down to a center pivot point, and then reverse all the way back out perfectly. F, E, D, C, B, A. The odds of dictating that by accident, especially when you're dictating to a scribe day after day, usually without reviewing the previous text or even having a manuscript in front of you, are astronomically low.
Yeah, that would be like trying to write a 3-page palindrome while just speaking off the cuff.
While keeping the theological logic completely intact the whole time.
Let's dig into that complexity then. You mentioned there's a major difference between how we use it in the West and how the ancient Hebrews used it. Why would they even write this way? It seems incredibly difficult.
It is difficult for us, sure. But for the ancient Hebrews, and Welch traces this, dating back to Isaiah or the Psalms in the 8th and 10th centuries BC, it was highly functional. You have to remember, they didn't have printing presses. Scrolls were scarce. They didn't have pockets full of paperbacks. This was primarily an oral tradition.
So if you wanted to keep a really long story straight,
You absolutely needed a mnemonic device. If I know the first half of the structure and I know it rigidly mirrors the second half, the structure itself actually helps me remember the words. It's like a built-in safety net for memorization.
But it also tells you how to read the philosophy, doesn't it? Because this completely blew my mind when I read Welch's source. In a standard English essay, where do I put my most important point?
Usually right at the end, the conclusion. You build your argument up and then you basically say, in summary, here's why I'm right.
But in Hebrew chiasmus,
The X marks the spot. The center is the treasure. Everything builds up to the middle, and everything flows away from the middle. The central axis is the most important message of the text. If you miss the center, you completely miss the point.
okay, I want to see this in action. Because it's easy to talk about X's and A's and B's in theory. Let's look at the actual text Welch highlights. I really want you to hear the rhythm of this.
Let's start with a really famous one from the Book of Mosiah. This is Mosiah chapter 3, verses 18 and 19. It's often called the natural man passage.
Okay, I have it pulled up right here. So looking at the structure, it starts with the concept of being humble and becoming as a child, and the atoning blood of Christ. That's our starting point, our A.
Then it moves inward. It says the natural man is an enemy to God. That's B.
And it keeps going deeper and deeper until we hit that pivot.
And watch the flip here. B was the natural man as an enemy. Then B prime, on the other side of the center, puts off the natural man. And A, which was humble and like a child, matches perfectly with the ending. Becomes as a child submissive, meek, humble.
It's a perfect circle. You start with the child, you end with the child.
And look at the center. Look at the pivot point between the natural man and the spiritual man. It is. Yields to the enticings of the Holy Spirit. That's the key. That's the only way to get from side A to side B. Structurally, the Holy Spirit is the bridge.
Let's do one more of these short ones, because I think the debate example from the source is just so clever. This is from 1 Nephi chapter 15.
Right. This is Nephi arguing with his brothers. It's a complete logical takedown.
It's not just poetry, it's a trap.
It really is. The structure creates a literal sandwich. The top bun is Nephi speaking to them. The lettuce is him quoting the Lord's words. The center meat is the direct question, do ye not remember? Then the bottom lettuce is him quoting the Lord's words again. And the bottom bun is Nephi speaking to them again.
So the structure literally forces his brothers to look at the center question. Do you not remember? Everything surrounds that one accusation.
It's a rhetorical bullseye. And again, Welch constantly emphasizes this. Smith dictated this. He didn't have a word processor to cut and paste and say, oh, let me move that sentence down so it matches the top paragraph. He just spoke it aloud.
There's also a moment Welch points out where the author seems to be having a bit of fun, like a little literary wink at the audience.
You're thinking of Alma chapter 41.
I am. This is where Alma is teaching his son about the doctrine of restoration.
Right. And the doctrine is basically you get what you give. If you put out good, you get good back. If you put out evil, you get evil back.
So look at the word choice Welch highlights here. Alma lists 4 distinct attributes: good, righteous, just, merciful.
And then, in the very next breath, He reverses them perfectly. Merciful, just, righteous, good.
He literally uses a chiasm, which is a literary structure that restores the beginning at the end to explain the theological concept of restoration.
It's pure meta-commentary. He's proving the doctrine with the grammar itself. It suggests a writer who is totally in control of the form, playful with it even. It's not just, I need to remember this list. It's, I'm going to use the shape of the list to demonstrate the meaning of the word.
Okay, so we have verses, we have clever puns, but Welch's analysis goes bigger, much bigger. And this is where my mind really started to bend a little bit reading the source.
The macro structures.
Specifically, the entire Book of Mosiah. Now, I've read Mosiah, and on the surface, it's confusing.
It is a mess chronologically. You have flashbacks inside of flashbacks. You have one group leaving the city of Zarahemla, another group getting lost, ancient records being read from the past. If you're trying to put it on a linear timeline, it's a total headache.
But Welch says, stop looking at the clock. Look at the architecture.
Exactly. He argues the book isn't organized by time at all. It's organized by chiasmus. Think of the entire book like a mountain. You start at the base, which is King Benjamin preaching peace to his sons and Mosiah being chosen as king.
Then you go up the slope and people enter a covenant.
And then you hit the peak. The absolute dead center of the book.
The story of Abinadi.
The prophet who gets burned at the stake.
Right.
He testifies, he reads the law, he is killed. That is the summit. And then you walk down the other side of the mountain, hitting the exact same markers in reverse order.
So opposite the covenant in the first half.
You have unbelievers refusing the covenant in the second half. Opposite Mosiah being chosen, judges being chosen. Opposite King Benjamin preaching at the start, Mosiah preaching at the end. Every major event involving Xenophon or Limhi has a mirror event on the other side.
That completely changes how you interpret the messy history. The chaos actually serves the structure.
And the structure serves the theology. By placing Abinadi at the center, the author is screaming, this is the point. The martyrdom and the testimony of Christ is the pivot upon which the entire Nephite history turns. Even though Abinadi dies early in the text, chronologically, structurally, he is the keystone holding the whole book together.
It's amazing to think that something that looks like bad editing to a Western reader might actually be perfect structure to an ancient one.
It definitely forces a rereading.
We have to talk about the crown jewel now. The source calls this an intricate gem. Alma chapter 36.
Yes. This is widely considered one of the best examples of extended chiasmus in any ancient literature, period. Not just in this book, but even compared to the Bible or other ancient texts.
Set the scene for us here.
So this is Alma the Younger. He's an old man now, and he's telling his son Helaman about his conversion. He's describing the most traumatic and ecstatic 3 days of his entire life when he was struck down by an angel and went from being an enemy of the church to a devoted believer.
And this isn't just a few verses, this is the entire chapter.
The whole chapter. And the symmetry is terrifyingly precise. It starts at A with, my son, give ear to my words, keep the commandments, and prosper. Then B, he talks about captivity and bondage. Then C, the pain. The sheer terror. He says he was harrowed up by the memory of his sins.
It just gets darker and darker. He's describing a literal descent into his own personal hell.
And the verses get shorter, tighter. The tension builds and builds until we hit the absolute center. Verse 18, there is one single thought that sits in the middle of all that agony.
I cried within my heart, O Jesus, thou Son of God, have mercy on me.
And then the reversal happens. C prime. The pain is totally gone. He says, my soul was filled with joy as exceeding as was my pain. Then B prime, he talks about being delivered from captivity. And finally, A prime. He ends exactly where he began. Keep the commandments and prosper.
Joy as exceeding as was my pain. The structure literally forces you to weigh those two emotions perfectly against each other.
And here is the profound so what of Welch's analysis. The literary turning point matches the biographical turning point. The exact moment the structure pivots calling on Christ is the exact moment Alma's soul pivots. The form and the content are perfectly fused together.
That is heavy. That is real craftsmanship.
It really is. It's a masterpiece of the form.
So, zooming out here, we have this massive analysis from Welch. What are we supposed to do with all this?
Well, let's look at the scorecard Welch has laid out. 1. Chiasmus is a distinct, highly complex, ancient Hebraic form. 2. It was virtually unknown to the 1830s American public, certainly at this staggering level of complexity. And 3. The Book of Mormon is absolutely packed with it, from single verses to entire books.
The implication being that Joseph Smith probably didn't just stumble into writing ancient Hebrew poetry by sheer accident.
Welch argues it makes it logical, purely from a literary and structural standpoint, to view the book as a product of the ancient world. It has the right fingerprint.
It's like finding a 19th-century letter in New York that uses perfect ancient Sumerian court etiquette. You just have to ask, how did this get here?
Exactly. And I think Welch's final thought is the best takeaway for anyone, regardless of where you stand religiously or politically. He says that the undeniable presence of these forms demands that we read the text differently.
We need to slow down.
We need to look at how it's written, not just what is written. There is an intentionality there that deserves a lot of respect.
It shifts you from just passively reading a story to inspecting a tapestry. You start looking for the threads.
Well said.
So, here is a thought to leave you with today as you go about your week. If these ancient structures are hidden in plain sight, deliberately designed to put the most important treasure right in the absolute center, what other speeches or books or arguments in your life are you misreading because you're only looking at the end for the conclusion? Maybe the real message is buried right in the middle, just waiting for you to find the pattern.
That's definitely something to think about.
Thanks for diving deep with us into the hidden architecture of the Book of Mormon. Keep looking for those patterns, and we will see you next time.